Evening, chaps. Evening. Welcome to the 5 Yard IDP podcast with me, Nath Davis, and him, Mr. Brendan Veal. How you doing, Mr. Veal? You all right?
I'm very well, mate. Very well. It's a nice new intro. I like that.
Yeah, just thought of mix it up a bit.
Yeah,
Just swap it around. Right. So we're back, and obviously, you guys know about our new scoring system choice and how we're going to be moving forward. We've got 3 weeks before the draft, including draft week itself. And what we're choosing to do is we are going to be going through a mock draft that we've just done recently, IDP mock draft based on that scoring. And we're going to be going through that over. We're going to pick 4 of the teams, 1 to 4 week 1. 5 to 8 week 2, and finally 9 to 12 in that 3rd week. And we're going to go through those teams, how they were picked, talk about how players went off the board and why they went off the board in those positions. And that's those 3. That's the next 3 weeks. But also in those 3 weeks, we're also going to be doing our sort of like introduction to IDP. I mentioned it on a couple of pods that I've been on recently. And it's mainly to do with the questions that we've received over the past year. It's based on new IDP players and maybe some of the IDP players that have been doing it for a year or so that had these kind of questions, probably niggling questions about how things work in the IDP world. That maybe something's not as accessible as they are offensively in all the stats that are out there. Sometimes you've got to do a little bit more work in the IDP world, and we're going to help you with where to find that information and also put some questions and some theories maybe to bed. So, Brent, first, what have you been up to? What have you been up to first?
Well, tying in with what Nath's just touched on and with sort of the slight rejigging of the format of the pod, I've spent a bit of time over the last week, as Nath mentioned, just collating a few questions, throwing in, a few ideas. But as Nath said, these are sort of questions which are sort of key to getting a bit more out of sort of playing the IDP format. It ties in with what we've done this week with the draft, so it's a fairly sort of broad spectrum of sort of questions which we need to address with a view to, basically what we're here for is to sort of attract a wider sort of IDP audience. That's why we sort of affiliate now with sort of Fancy and Frames and those guys. So it's just about trying to sort of grow the IDP market, for want of a better description. But again, just people that are already playing it, maybe they've just sort of dipped their toe in, and we have seen it on occasions. They've tried it and sort of dropped back out because they're not as comfortable with, maybe some of the scoring, where the points come from. And crucially, and this is why we've sort of opted to do a bit of a 3 week sort of run up to the main draft, as Nate said. A lot of these questions will help you sort of look at players a bit more sort of concisely when it comes to sort of the drafting side of it. So basically what we're going to run down is a little sort of bullet point list I put together over the last few days of, certain questions. So
Brent's going to fire them at me.
I am. So we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A before we sort of, get plums deep in the first 4 teams of our draft. So these are not in any discernible order. These are just, I've put them together, a few comments, and Nathan and I've sort of...
Yeah, they got picked up through various different platforms throughout the year. And some of them we've done the answers to those. Probably do them a little bit different now. I mean, one thing that I've got to add is the fact that we're all learning in this sort of fantasy world that we're sort of like in. We're playing these games and we're trying to predict what we're doing, but we're learning. I have sort of like gone on a little bit of a journey over the past probably 3-4 months of trying to get better, really do more work around why. Not just taking things on face value. I've got there's some great guys that I follow I follow all the time. I mean, Tom Kissenbury, Mike Wooler, obviously the Fantasy and Frame guys. There's so many more. The IDP guys, the IDP Show, all of those guys. They help me so much. Just try, and I think it's more about. It's not so much about the knowledge, because I think a lot of us have that knowledge. It's understanding it in the IDP world and understanding the changes. That's one of the big things. I mean, everybody can just take a stat from last season and say, "Oh, he's going to be good," but no. There's so much more in it, around schemes, around just around use players. And I think it's really important that people try to get a better understanding of that. I mean, and I'm talking at my level at this moment in time. That's the journey that I've been on. I'm not telling you guys that maybe you've just started IDP and thinking, geez, how much have I got to do? No, you haven't got to do that much. So just to get into it, you haven't got to do that much.
No.
But it's the further education that's behind it. And that's, it's all good fun. I mean, that's why we're in it. We're not in it just to be stagnant. So yeah, okie doke. So Bren, what are you gonna do? You're gonna kick us off with some of these questions that we've got.
Yeah. So what we're gonna kick off, like I said, these are in no sort of particular order. They are literally, as Nate said, just queries we've had fired at us, which we probably have touched on, but we thought we'd sort of bundle it all together in a bit of an intro. And then it ties in nicely with, the next sort of 2 to 3 weeks going through these mock drafts. So kicking off with one question. How important is a player's snap count? In so much as, can you use the number of snaps from a previous season as a decent guide for a player's possible productivity for the coming season?
Okay. So yeah, absolutely great question. And snap count is huge. Player snap count, yeah, it's very important. But what if you break it down to the positional snap count of that player last year? So what position did he play in last year? How important was he for the team? So that is his positional snap count value. Okay. So if he changes, a player comes into his position, then we can probably gauge that they're going to have the same sort of snap count. That's how I would sort of like gauge it. But also that is still relevant to the player, of his value. I mean, if he's seeing 100% of the snaps and he's on the field, then he is seriously highly valued. In IDP, it's something that is huge for us, huge, because especially at linebacker, and especially when you're talking about tackle numbers, it is really relevant. The more you're on the field, the more opportunity to that you've got to make those tackles and get those core points. Doesn't quite apply this. It's not quite the same with sacks and what we call big plays, interceptions, and things like that. Obviously, if you're on the field more, it does enhance your chances to get more of those, but it's not, you're still looking at, you could have 5 interceptions in 1 week. It could happen. So that's not there, but you're not going to have 100 tackles in 1 week. So, you see what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is, when you're looking at the tackles, which is where your flaws are in IDP, that's where you want to be looking at. You want to be picking up players that have got good tackle numbers. They give you solid figures year in, year out. Not necessarily the same player, but the same position in that team. If you know where I'm sort of like going with that. Is that all right? Do you kind of get?
Yeah.
You understand that?
Yeah. So moving on, and this sort of ties in somewhat with the sort of the previous question. How important is the team or scheme a player plays in?
Exactly. Yeah, it does tie into that question. Gosh, it's like we thought of this. No, but yeah. So hugely. So Tom Kislingbury, who I just mentioned, is somebody who he's got like a defensive scheme handbook. That is a great. It's free and it's out there, guys. You got to have a look at that. That is some great insight into how teams set up. and it's vital. It's absolutely vital for understanding what a team is trying to do. Then when you talk about putting players into those positions, you can quite easily see who are the guys that you want to target. So you'll be able to get your top players quite quickly off that side of things. So yeah, schemes are huge. There's so many changes that have happened in the past, I don't know, 5 years probably. NFL teams are very, very different. The way we play, way teams play, IDPs set up. Mainly, one of the major things is the dual threat quarterback. There's more and more of them that can run the ball. So teams are, your old massive linebacker that's there to hit and stop the run. He's very important still, but you possibly wouldn't want him on the field if you have got a running quarterback constantly that can absolutely burn him. So that's why you're seeing maybe some of these safeties, what we call hybrid. I don't like the word, but they kind of are. They're just brilliant. They can play all over the field and they can do so many varied things. But you're seeing these guys, more and more of them appear in the NFL, and which is starting to change how teams line up. And play hugely. Some teams actually, we'll talk about that in a bit, lined up last year with no linebackers on the field. Wow.
No, I mean, it's why I sort of inferred that there wasn't any sort of discernible order to these. Actually, I did lump those two questions together quite intentionally because they do kind of go hand in hand. So yeah, we don't just throw this together in 5 minutes,
I haven't seen these, but that's good. Thank you. I've got a bit more hope for the rest of them then. Have I?
Yeah, you'd be all right. But yeah, as Nate said, the reason I put them together is, as you touched on answering the previous question, it is things like that. It is the scheme. And this is why, the off season can be, such an interesting time as well. Has a player moved to a new team? Has the coaching staff changed? As Nate said, have they brought in new players that are going to interfere with that snap count? So yeah, I mean, those two questions really do go sort of hand in hand. So
absolutely.
Okay, moving on to, so the next one seems like a basic question. I suppose in some ways it is, but we've had it fired at us. So how important is a player's age?
IDP wise, interesting question. It's a bit of a mixed bag, really, to be fair, on the age side. Where the kind of cliff is a question which often comes up.
Position dependent?
Very much so. Much so. I mean, if you think of DBs and corners being very athletic, lads that are big and quick, as in tall and rangy. Yeah, I mean they're definitely going to get a drop off in age. Absolutely, they are. It just is what it is. As I'm over 40 now, so I'm there is definitely
neither of us are tall and rangy. So
no, there isn't a position that I would fit. But there we go. But no, going on to
snap holder.
Yeah. Could get a bit jittery. No, but no, linebackers probably slightly buck the trend. Demario Davis, great example of somebody that bucked the trend of a linebacker that got better with age. It's kind of knowing there. So, for example, when you're a kind of middle linebacker, even on a weak side linebacker, it's not quite like that anymore. It's just mainly two linebackers. I like to call one the lead linebacker and the other one a kind of cover linebacker. But it's the linebacker position is one of knowledge. You need to hone your skills to get better and better at that. It's the same. It is the same with linemen to a degree and edge rushers. But then you will still get guys that are, like Micah Parsons last year. He is an absolute athlete, and that's the problem that O-lines are coming up against him because he's not only big, he's bloody quick, and that idea is that that probably will deteriorate as he gets older. but yeah, linebackers they are a little bit different, but it's not an easy question to answer that.
No, it's not. No,
It's very position specific, and it's very. I suppose I think that's an NFL thing, not because you get some freaks. You get some freaks in the offensive side of things. You get running backs that last longer, and you get wide receivers that last longer. But yeah, I would say DB's different. DB's different. Definitely more of a cliff there. Maybe not so much on the other guys, but it depends on what pounding they're taking week in, week out, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just flicking through some stats now. I'm looking at, I don't know, someone like a Cam Hayward's, DL4 last season, 32 years now. Would you expect,
Again,
10 sacks last season? I mean,
he's
a good player, but would you expect to see a bit of a drop off? I think he's a difficult one though, isn't he?
Potentially, yeah. The drop off will come. It's trying to gauge it. The thing is if you're just saying it, do you get to 30? Do you fall off the cliff? No, absolutely not. You don't. In those kind of positions, especially not, because you're going to get players that are going to buck that trend big time. But yeah, it's a bit of a wishy-washy one for me. I don't think there's really an answer to it. I think it's very much dependent on teams. Maybe in future years you might find it a bit more because, like we talked about, those hybrid safeties and stuff. If they are making such a prominent push in the league, then the way things are going is everyone's going to be more mobile. I mean, QBs are getting more mobile. Everyone's getting more. I mean, geez, it's getting. You've got to be able to do everything to become a really good player in the NFL. I mean, that's going that way. I'm interested to see how the next 5 years pan out because of that. But at this moment in time, no. Age isn't something that I would really massively take into consideration when you're talking about drafting players.
Yeah. Okay. I quite like this next question, actually. Very simple. Are some players just freaks? So I suppose with that question in mind, they're just looking at, I don't know, TJ Watt. So with that, I would sort of add into, I mean, that's the question we've got. Are some players just freaks? So I suppose what they're trying to gauge it, if you've got an elite IDP player, can they play? Are they just going to turn in good seasons regardless of the scheme, the team, how good they are, how poor they are? It's going to be a factor, but
I don't know. I don't know. I think that there's probably more elite players out there. And this is my personal opinion, absolutely my personal opinion. People may shoot me down for this, but I believe that there's probably more elite players out there that have just fallen into the wrong scheme and the wrong place, rather than the elite players could just go anywhere and do anything. I don't know. There are a few of them definitely that are head and shoulders above the rest at this moment in time. But without the stats to prove it, it's a real difficult one. Again, it's a weird question of you could do it in any sport. If he done this, if he was playing for that team, would he been as good? I don't know. He never did. But you know what I mean. So it's going to be interesting to see.
It's a nice hypothetical question, I suppose.
It is a hypothetical question. Yeah. But like I said, I do believe that there's a few players that just have got shite landing spots, and you go, God, he could have been good. Like Jonathan Taylor is a running back. I mean, he landed on the Colts. I mean, and just what a great spot to land in. I mean, he could have landed on the Chiefs. Would that really, when you look at that, he's going to have an absolute down tick if he played for the Chiefs at that time, because they were a passing team, and it was Clyde Edwards-Helaire that went there. Would Clyde Edwards-Helaire have gone, you know what I mean? These kind of shit where you go, yeah, it's great to think about, great to talk about. And thank you for whoever checked that one in.
Okay, moving on. And this ties in nicely with what we're doing in the next couple of weeks. How do you prioritize IDP positions when drafting?
Wow, there's loads of stuff, loads of things to look at on that. Now, obviously, that we've chosen our type of scoring, so you've got to take that hugely into consideration. If you are watching this pod and I've got some random scoring going on, go and have a look at it, go and understand it, go and put together a list where you can easily look at, if you're playing it on Sleeper, you can quite easily look at what happened last year. And at least that'll give you a straightforward rundown of where the points were. And it should give you an idea straight away of the level of points. I mean, I'm in a couple of best ball leagues with some real random scoring. And seriously, you click on it and you go, whoa, Josh Allen scored 675 points. Wow, these are cute. Go back and you go, oh, look at where the points are. Look at where the points are, you know. So that's hugely important to do that. In our leagues, yeah, I mean, positionally, again, we've done the stats, we've done the breakdowns. You'll see where guys come off the board. The one thing that we'll talk about in a bit is to talk about where your linebacker 1 and your linebacker 12 and your linebacker 24. So when people talk about rounds, which round did they come in? You're basing it on the fact that you've got 12 teams in a round. So round 1 will be 1 to 12, and then so on, as you go round 2, round 3, round like that. So you'll be looking at the 1 to 12 would be your first linebackers coming off the board. So everybody wants one of those, at least one of those. So that's probably what's going to happen. Now, depending on also how your league set up positionally. So if you've got to pick 3 linebackers, 3 DLs, 3 DBs, then you really need to think about that. You need to think about that value of the 36th linebacker and the 36th DB and the 36th DL to see and what their correlation is between the number 1 of those positions, because the difference in points is huge. If it's hugely variable, then you need to judge it as so. So, for example, let's take it in ours. 1 second, let me get that. I can get that information quickly. Linebacker 1, 310 points. Linebacker 24, 202 points. Linebacker 36, 175 points. That's what they finished with last year in the league. So it tells you the difference between the positional, where they're going to come off the board, and what the differences positions are. Now, if for example in DBs the position is a lot smaller, then you can risk gambling later. You know what I mean? So, for example, you probably wouldn't invest too early in that player. This is so basic stuff. It's exactly the same for offensive players. So anybody that's already playing fantasy football will probably know that. Yeah. So that kind of do you get that? Sorry if that was too. Was that too complex?
No, not for me.
You've played it before, but do you think I'm just going a little bit too deep?
No. I think, and this is what we're trying to do when Nathan and I sort of plan this pod is, yes, we want to sort of drill down into the figures and all the rest of it, but it's trying, as Nathan touched on in the intro, it's trying not to overwhelm people with the nuts and bolts of it are, as Nathan just said, it's not in any way dissimilar from the offensive side of the game. It shouldn't be that complex. Once you get into the basics of it, then you can start to. But the purpose of answering some of these questions is just that it's trying to simplify 1 or 2 things. You get the basics right, then you'll start to enjoy it more. Then you'll start to just expand on that. So
the only real difference is the fact that the content's not out there. I mean, people talk about stuff like balanced scoring and all that, which is a load of crap. About whether things are balanced between offense and defense, it doesn't really make any difference. It's not going to be. I don't think it can be. I'm a believer of what Tom Kisenbury said when it comes to it can't be done. I kind of agree, but in our view, that's not the point. We're playing a game. If everyone's happy and you all start the same way and you all play the game, then all you've got to do is learn the rules of that game. Learn the implications of that game. How much is a goal? If suddenly you were playing football and it was 10 points for a goal and 2 points for a throw-in, somebody said to you, oh, hello. Well, you're suddenly going to start looking at that, but you need to understand that first. You know what I mean? You can't just go into it and go, oh, I feel that X amount of points should be for that. No, what are they for?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You've got to look at it. You can't just take it as read.
You've got to work with, with what you've got to play with.
Absolutely.
So next question ties in, again, quite nicely with sort of the drafting side of things and prioritizing players. So someone messaged us and asked, how key are tackle numbers? I suppose what by that they mean, how is consistency? I suppose tackle numbers are a degree of consistency sort of key to success. So I suppose that would tie in with our sort of preference to prioritizing high scoring, typically high tackling sort of linebackers. I suppose basically the question is that tackle count a good basis to start from?
Yes, absolutely. Anybody that plays IDP will, you still got to go down to that one thing that happens the more time that you're on the field, and to the right players in the right positions and the right schemes. You will get DBs, safeties that will put up some really massive tackle figures, then probably not sustainable player to player. Linebackers a little bit more. Well, they are a lot more sustainable year in, year out. The DLs, edge rushers, again, it's not really their game. Again, you've got the thing is when you're talking about the middle linebacker or the main linebacker or whatever you want to call him, that the one guy that team relies on as the linebacker, right? He is there mainly to stop the run. So the tackle numbers are pretty much consistent from that point of view. That guy that does it might not be the same guy year in, year out, but there is a position there that is going to get those figures. And that's the key, is to try and hammer that. But also there are guys that safeties, DBs, and that rack up some numbers. And yeah, you've got to take a note and you've got to look at them. If things haven't changed too much in that team, in that scheme, in the roster, if it hasn't changed too much, then the likelihood is, potentially you could go with it. What else have you got to go with? You've got to go off something. You're not going to go off interceptions, are you? How can you? It's pretty much quarterback dependent. Even sacks, they are quarterback. Well, I'm sure. Is that a question that could be coming?
We've got something that touches on it. Yeah.
Okay.
But given that you've just, again, sort of next question on the list, actually, I'll sort of dive in there because you've mentioned the schemes again. So someone's asked, with the change in schemes and the way, as you said earlier, that the NFL sort of moved on defensively in a lot of ways in the last sort of 4 or 5 years. Given the free roaming nature of a lot of safeties and changes in defensive setup, could you make an argument for taking a top safety early in the draft? Something we've discussed ad nauseum of late.
So difficult. Yeah, it is something that we've discussed. Yes, to a degree.
Depending on who that safety is.
Yeah. The difficulty is trying to gauge it again. And like I said, it's working out the tiers points wise, like you would do with running backs and wide receivers, where the wide receiver 1 is, where the wide receiver 12 is, where the wide receiver 24 is. Exactly the same with the linebackers, DBs. If you do that, you're going to give yourself that gauge of where you're going to invest.
Well, with that in mind, actually, why don't we cut that one short? Because I think to illustrate the point about the DBs, let's stick a pin in that one. Because when we pull up the screenshot of the draft, whoever sent that question or anyone that's got a query about, and I know the Fantasy and Frames guys have done a bit on this, the important roles of safeties and all the rest of it. And yes, they are becoming, auxiliary linebackers. And like you said, some teams are setting up on certain plays with all safeties, no linebackers. But let's just hang fire on that one, actually, because when we pull up the draft, it will become quite obvious quite quickly where sort of the DBs are sort of prioritized, even some of the better ones when it comes to the overall draft, which is, what we're going to be looking at in a little while. Okay, so we'll skip over that one for the time being. Yeah, you sort of touched on this, 1 or 2 answers ago as well. So someone's asked, how much stock can you put in big play? So I put a little bit of meat on that. So I suppose it's kind of taking on board what you've said. It's certainly easier to make an educated guess with the likes of sort of DLs and linebackers, as to sort of how many sacks they might get in the coming season. You can start to look at stats relating to, pressures, quarterback hits, etc., factoring all that in. I suppose on the flip side, going back to the DBs, when they're talking about big plays, they're not just talking about sacks, they're talking about forced fumbles. I suppose crucially, the one big gamble, and this is where sort of the matchups come into play from time to time, something like interceptions, big points, and the player I've used I used him last summer as an example, and I said I was going a bit cold on him, as Xavier Howard, who had a monster 2020 season with interceptions, and we talked about him in the summer. Will he go again? I felt, even as a Dolphins fan, no, because the chances of that happening in back-to-back seasons are pretty slim, to be honest. So,
okay, so this is all about roster build. Now, the draft that you're going to see us do in a bit, what we did, they were all starters. We were looking at the players that were starting. So forget your benches, forget your gambles. So when you're talking about interceptions, sacks, maybe not so much sacks, because there are some players that are just generally just pressured. The difference is when you're looking at sacks, you're really looking at pressures, or you should be looking at pressures and the conversion rate to sacks. Now, we'll go into that in a bit, or when we talk about particular players that have come off the board and when they have. But what I'm saying is, if players are getting to the quarterback from DLs, then what you need is a good matchup. Now, but at the end of the day, they've got to get there. If they're getting there week in, week out, play in, play out, happy bloody days. You know what I mean? You have got to look at picking up that kind of player. But it's still going to be down to roster, how you build it. You want security. How I build a roster, I would probably say, for example, if there's 2 linebackers, say it's 3 linebackers to be picked, I'm going to be looking at 2 to be massively tackle heavy. I might have a little bit of a punt on the third one, but probably not on linebacker. DLs, I'm going to be looking at 2 of those as well to try and get 2 guys that I know that are solid, and then probably have a punt on the third one, maybe. DBs, it's just so different, really. A DB I would still go tackle. Wouldn't you, Bren? When you go tackles first?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I go tackles for possibly all 3 positions in DB, because I still feel that when you look at particular teams, then you know that they can rack up the tackle numbers. You could get yourself a Jordan Poyer. I'm just trying to think of Logan Ryan, players like that have been around and done it, that are year in, year out, there or thereabouts, and you could pretty much pick up all 3 players that are going to be decent tackle numbers to give you that kind of security. But they may not win you that big week. So you would want on your bench, you'd want some big players that are going to be good matchups, especially the guys that are going to rush the quarterback. Yeah. The DBs that are going to be, like we saw, well, we're going to talk about Carl Duggar and players like him, Derwin James. We're going to talk about them in a minute. But players, they're safeties that are going to play up in the box and they're going to rush the quarterback. Yeah. So they're going to get sacks in there. Then we're going to talk about DLs that have got, week in, week out, that are going to score you good points based on pressures. So just going back to that actual question, which was big plays. I wouldn't build my roster on big plays, not at all. I would build them on tackles. would be the answer. I build them on tackles, but I would definitely be throwing in some players that have a decent sack count and to have a decent interception count. Why not? Why not chuck them in, especially on the benches? And maybe in those third spots. Maybe in the third spots, but definitely not in the early spots. I wouldn't be thinking, absolutely not. I mean, you're going to see that in a minute.
Yeah. Okay. Right. There was one last question. I'm going to cut it short. Do you want to pull out my charges failing? I'm going to have to go and get the backup one out of the office.
Yeah, go on.
Are you all right? If you pull up the, do you want to pull up the mock draft sheet
Absolutely.
and give us a bit of intro? I will be 2 seconds. I've just got to get my backup charger. I don't know what's wrong with this one. So
absolutely,
2 seconds, folks.
Go and get him. Go and get him. Right. So going on to this mock draft, just to give you some insight into the mock draft, this is the fantasy and frame scoring. Let me get you the old ticker tape that's going to be going around the bottom when I can. Here we go. Okay, so the sleeper settings are half PPR, Superflex, and IDP settings, which are the fantasy and frame settings. You can get them from obviously anything that I post. Message me, but they're also pinned to our fantasy and frames. They're pinned to my my Twitter. Also, so looking at this was to do with, this was our setup, our team setup in this was 2 QBs, 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 3 DL, 3 linebackers, and 3 DBs. So obviously it's not true position for any of those guys that play the true position. Jesus Christ, Brendan, what is he wearing clogs? He's wearing clogs and he's killed a fly. Yeah, so just going over that, yeah. It's as balanced as I think it can be. From an IDP perspective. How you getting on, Brad? Can't hear me. Just making lots of noise.
Right, really sorry about that. I don't know what happened with that.
That sounded like an elephant on roller skates going around your showroom. Then that was unbelievable. You've
Honestly, I had this thing plugged in. I'm like, what the hell happened now? I've just got this battery low ball now. I'm going, what?
You've deafened half of the IDP population of the UK.
Right, I am very, very sorry, Russians. That was very unprofessional. It won't happen again, I promise.
I've gone through the build. I've gone through the build and told him about his 2 QB, 3 running back, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 3 DL, 3 linebacker, 3 DB. The reason is for this is trying to get some kind of balance. This isn't balanced scoring. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. We can't quite get there. I don't think anybody really will. But it doesn't matter because as long as we're all on board and we're all enjoying what we're doing, we're trying to show you that you're going to get trade value and we're trying to get as much information over to the public. Then happy days. We're winning the battle. But okay, so let's talk about where should we go from this, Bram?
What do you want to start? Well, let's start with the linebackers because, what we saw in this draft is pretty typical of what we would expect to see. Really, as Nathan touched on, answering that question about, what do you prioritize in terms of your IDP players. And what we saw with this was, it's the same with your offensive players. Sooner or later, someone will start a bit of a run. We saw that with this. Obviously, we're just focusing on the first 4 teams. As you'll see, you've got Leonard, Brooks, Watt coming off. Well, Watt, bit of a hybrid. So let's go with Leonard and Brooks. But what kicked it off, actually, and we're going to skirt around what happened outside of these 4 teams, obviously. But just so you guys have got some context, so Micah Parsons went off at 4-3. The 10th team took him, which sort of it then gets, as with any draft, it gets people thinking, right, when do I prioritize that position? Given that we've already identified the linebackers there are, you've got to be sort of looking, especially with the setup that Nate's touched on. You've got 3 of them. Now, if you leave it too late, you're going to be scraping the bottom of the barrel. Yes, there's some high, decent scoring linebackers much further on, but at what point are you going, shit, I need to jump on this now, otherwise I'm going to get left behind.
Absolutely.
And a crucial point Nath made, and this kind of ties in with the intro, is, and I'm sorry if you did mention it while I was thumping around like Nelly the elephant, but it's your position on the board. As Nath mentioned, we discussed this earlier in the week. If you're at that, if you're either end of that board when that run starts, and then you're going, right, well, if I don't gamble on one now,
24 picks later.
Like you said, exactly. 24 picks later.
It's a long way.
Yeah, Leonard's gone, Brooks is gone, Alucon's gone, Warner's gone. You know what I mean?
It's exactly what happened. But just to fill you in about the guys that picked this, so we've got obviously we've got all the IDP Plus leagues that we ran last year, and this is 12 guys, including ourselves, from one of the divisions in the IDP Plus leagues. So these guys are well versed in this. They also had access to the scoring spreadsheets, because that's only fair in this mock draft, knowing that it was going out to the.
Looking at my team, that may have been a mistake.
We took the names we took the names off it, because that was the deal. Everybody said, look, we're going into this sort of like semi-blind. Let's not get ridiculed. And I was like, no, it's fine. And do you know what? I tell you what, everybody picked it. It wasn't by the book. It wasn't quite by the book. No. But there is definitely a feel that, I look at it and I think to myself, so teams 1, 2, 3, and 4, they're all good side. They're all good teams. I don't think anybody's really screwed it all up, or anybody's gone too mental. Looking at it from a full team perspective, the balance is pretty well. Look, we told everybody they've got to fill or got to try to fill their positions. But a couple of players that didn't fill their positions, they made an error. They took a third QB. Team 4 being one of them. But that's what happens. That's absolutely fine. But it still gave us as much information as we needed to move forward. We found some really interesting stuff out. The color of the board was really interesting. You can see that pink dominates the bottom half, knowing that that's the DBs. Orange was kind of middle to bottom, which is the DLs. Then it became, wide receivers was they went from the top all the way through, because I suppose that it's just that spread of players that there is. And then the top was dominated by green and red, which is QBs and running backs, meaning that the linebackers sort of like fitted. It was really interesting to see him come off the board, and when they did, and it didn't go too mad too early, but I think this is quite common. What we're watching people certainly invest in Micah Parsons. I can't really fully buy into the production on a personal note. I know, fantastic player, and I get it in Dynasty, but this isn't Dynasty. This is redraft. This is.
Yeah. Does Parsons come back to that? I mean, what was his snap count? His sack count for, was it 20?
Oh, it's pretty. Yeah, it's pretty high. But what was great about Parsons was just everything that he'd done particularly quite well. He didn't miss a lot. He didn't miss a lot of tackles. He converted a lot of pressure.
But again, going back to one of the guys' questions earlier. I mean, yeah, he's young, and like you say, Dynasty or one. But if you're looking at, say, a redraft league or something like this, odds of him sort of replicating that, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would look at straight on. I mean, anybody, any analyst, any guys that are in that are doing this all the time, and people say, "Who do you think is going to regress?" I guarantee you, 99.9% of everyone goes straight to the top of the leaderboard. Boom, that guy.
Yeah. Do it again, mate.
Who was top? Cooper Cup. Cooper Cup. regress, arrow down. Absolutely, why not? It makes absolutely sense because they have had a fantastic season, and it's not really sustainable year in, year out. He might be okay for the second season. Your phone's ringing, Brent. It's coming through.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, he's a fantastic pickup from anybody who's going to get him. And I think he's going to have a very good season. Would I pay top dollar for him? I'm not sure. No, well, I didn't, and I wouldn't. I'll wait for him to go off, and then that gauges me for where the next one's going to come, and that's where I'm usually interested in either the second or third top linebacker. But that's a personal thing. I've given away my tactic in that breath. How about you, Brian? What do you think on that first linebacker? Are you happy to set the? Are you happy to put the flag in?
Am I going to set the runoff? I don't know. I'm kind of with you on that a little bit. I love Micah Parsons as a player, but one thing we talked about earlier was the crucial thing when you're looking at the stats, as Nathan and I discussed, was, and this is why answering that question from a bit earlier on, why do you prioritize the linebackers? It's because when you look at the other two IDP positions, the DLs and the DBs, you see the drop-off start quite quickly in terms of points from last season, performance, etc. Whereas I think it's a little bit like the sort of the wide receiver berth, isn't it? Where you've got, you don't have to be that invested in, the top wide receiver. And it's a little bit the same with the linebackers. I'm just looking down the list now, and you can go, you're looking at down to sort of the 20s, and you're still getting good. You still want to go in and take someone, that's going to give you, that points return on the season.
Yeah, I mean, I'd want two, if not all three. I want to get those guys because the drop off. I know what you're saying, but I don't necessarily agree because I think the issue is if you get players, you got three linebackers, right? And you got to get 36 out of all 12 teams, right? 36 linebacker spots that you got to fill, starting linebackers, right? Now, I think there's probably about 20. I don't know. I'm trying to work out how many what I think is starting linebacker, big, not middle linebacker. Like I said, the linebacker one spots that are in a team. There's a couple of teams that don't have one at the moment. The Chargers don't really have one. They don't have one now because White was it. They've got rid of him. Now they've re-signed Troy Reader. So you could say Troy Reader probably is it. But we'll wait and see. Would you would you value somebody like Troy? So knowing that Troy Reader is in where he's at, so he takes one of those top 32 teams. He has a starting linebacker spot. That means that he should be one of those 32 spots then, does it? Where did he come off? Just as example. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm like looking at it and I think to myself, I really want to get all three inside the 20. Wow, 26. I want to get all three linebackers in the 26, those three starting ones. And I mean, that might be a bit rich, but that's my personal thing. And I probably would value that over the DLs and the DBs to make sure that I'm going to make that happen. But it depends on how the draft goes because you've got to look at it. And if they start coming off and everybody's going absolutely linebacker crazy, then yeah, you might have to act. But you should be able to, let's see have a look at this one then, Brad. So look at team one. What's your thoughts on team one?
So yeah, I mean, so they've looked at Parsons going off at sort of 4-3.
Yeah.
Let it go a couple of, and then gone bang, taken Leonard.
Yeah. So Leonard was the just to let people know because you can't see the rest of the board at this time.
Yeah.
So Leonard was second.
Yeah, he was the second linebacker off.
Yeah. TJ,
And then team two followed suit with Jordan Brooks. So you're looking at linebacker, Leonard linebacker 7, Jordan Brooks linebacker 3, based on last season's.
Yeah, TJ Watt, we're obviously saying he's going into
DL
category because he's edge rusher.
Not counting that. So, but then so you look at, but like you say, there wasn't I mean, again, I'm looking at the sort of the whole board, so we're not counting Watt, but it didn't spark a massive run on linebackers with the other teams.
No.
So it's kind of that sort of reaction in the draft, isn't it? So, but by the time we got to sort of round 9, you still have players like Warner, Devondre Campbell, TJ Edwards on the board.
So just to let you know, so looking at these 4 teams as a whole, you can see quite so. Olukon was the 9th linebacker off the board. Just to let everybody know. So we had what you guys can't see is Leonard and Brooks. Obviously, you can see, and White. Can you see White? No, you can't see. You can't see White. So Devin White come off 4th, Rocco and Smith 5th, Wagner 6th, Kendrick 7th, Martinez 8th, Olukon, who you can see, come off at 9 for team 4. So, I mean, it's a real interesting one around the linebacker situation. It obviously kicked in a little bit around that 5th round, which I think looking at the scoring, I think that's about right.
I mean, the interesting one that we touched on while the draft was going off was there was a bit of discussion about, well, where would someone take Foyce Olukon? And again, this ties in with changes that have happened during. I would have been inclined to take him a bit earlier. I like him as a player, but then given the move to Jags, I don't know. Is he going to have that sort of? Bearing in mind he was playing with another top LB last season in Deion Jones.
So I don't like Olukon as a player. I think Olukon he's one of these players. I mean, from IDP perspective. Absolutely, he seems to get a lot of time on the field, and where was he? Snap count was through the roof last year. Let me just get that up. Snap count. Oh my gosh, it was through the roof. I'm sure it was. I think he was right up there as the top, if not second. I think it was second linebacker. Haven't got that to hand, which is a pain in the ass.
Give me 2 seconds. It was.
It's high.
11:48.
Yeah, it's high. That's high. So he's seen an absolute shed load of snaps at the Falcons, which is understandable. Will he get that at Jacksonville? He probably will. Will that turn into fantasy points? I don't know. So when I talked about it earlier and talking about teams and their positional snap count, you need to look at the Jacksonville Jaguars snap count to look at, is he going to fit into one of those roles, or is he going to create a role for himself? Whatever it is, it's a bit of a gamble. So that's why he's dropped down the board, in my opinion. But look, if you want to pick him up there, Brent. I mean, you like him. It wasn't your pickup.
No.
But yeah, I mean, 7-4. I don't know. Going 2 rounds after Jordan Brooks. Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad value when you look at it from that point of view, because he could score around the same.
I think again, looking at the rest of the board, he's gone off after Bobby Wagner.
Yeah, but Bobby Wagner's position's massively changed, and he's now he's at a team that, like I mentioned earlier, they played with no linebackers. Now they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that with Bobby Wagner on the field. Surely not. Now, but it's still a punt when you look at that. What I mentioned, but when you talk about Jordan Brooks and Darius Leonard that were picked up above him, then I get that, because there is no change. Actually, it's arrow up. Jordan Brooks got to be arrow up. Bobby Wagner's gone. It might be slightly different role that he plays, but it's still good. I mean, Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks, I think they both broke their tackle numbers last year and the snap numbers. So when you look at it from that point of view, you think to yourself, you you're virtually not guaranteed, but it's a bloody safe bet to pick Jordan Brooks up there. Darius Leonard, yeah, year in, year out, kind of nothing's really changed that I can see at Indy that makes you think, he's going to have some kind of regression. If anything, I think he didn't have a particularly great year. It was a bit of a mixed year for him. But anyway, moving on. Come on, Brownhouse, we're going to be on here. We're going to be on here for bloody hours. Where are we now?
So we stick with the linebackers, or are we going to move?
Yeah, no, stick with the linebackers. Who's next?
Okay,
Warner.
so we got Fred Warner for Team 1, gone for line 1, which did actually spark probably the biggest run on linebackers looking across the board as a whole.
Yeah.
Because then we saw so Crosby went off. And then Devondre Campbell went off Team 3, TJ Edwards, Logan Wilson, Tremaine Edmonds, Joey Bosa.
Yeah.
That those sort of 5 players, unless I'm mistaken.
Bosa will play at edge, but the rest of them.
Take Joey out. So those 4, Bosa was a bit of a hybrid. I can't see anywhere. That was probably about. Yeah, that was actually the biggest run on sort of linebacker. So I think you're seeing the stage there where people are going, right, we've got to get in now because of, like Nate said, the way the team's set up, 3 linebackers. We've got to get someone in there, in the starting lineup who's going to score decent points.
I agree.
I think Campbell's a good pick up there, actually.
I think
linebacker 5 from last season, going off sort of 9-3. Yeah, I think that's good value.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad. And I think the thing is when you look at Devondre Campbell last year, that was quite incredible. Nobody really saw it. And, I was quite a big Chris Barnes fan, actually. I thought he might have that job. And, Devondre Campbell absolutely smashed it and got himself some big money. And, we know this year, because of that big money, he shouldn't see any change in what he does. So I think he's a really good, solid pick. Coming up in the 13th linebacker, I wouldn't be surprised if Devondre Campbell could jump over some of those players in front of him. I think he's more of a solid pick. And Warner. I think Warner's a solid pick. Mosley, yeah, not bad. Deion Jones is really interesting to me. I know, he's not on these teams yet, but yeah, we'll get to Deion Jones coming off at 10th.
Yeah, it'll be we'll have a proper talk about him sort of next week.
TJ Edwards is here.
I was going to say your one of your little sleeper picks for this season has gone off at 9-4.
I mean that's great. I'm happy to see him go off that early in a way. I know that these guys probably been watching what we do and what we talk about, so they know that I'm high on him. But I think he's definitely more of a gamble than Campbell, really, in that range. But it's a gamble that I would be willing to take. I think he's a really good linebacker, and he won that role. And I think there's snaps to be had, especially with Singleton gone. Right.
So with that in mind, looking and trying to sort of focus on sort of teams 1, 3, 4, which is what we've got on the screen at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, would you say after that, so then we're dropping down to sort of Hicks, Shaq Thompson, and the aforementioned Singleton. Are you into the realms then of just sort of plug in holes a little bit?
A little bit. I mean, if you take out you look at the purple that's below that, then the one that stands out to me is Shaq Thompson. I think Shaq Thompson is a good pickup from Team 3 at that point over Jordan Hicks. Jordan Hicks is coming into Minnesota as the other linebacker. Will he get a big enough snap share to really be, to rack up those kind of points in that thing? Alex Singleton is really random. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I would take Levante David over Alex Singleton. There's too many question marks. Not only is he coming off an absolutely really disappointing season from Philadelphia, losing his job, and kind of getting cut. I just feel that, I mean, his missed tackle rate was through the roof, but also because of what Denver have got there. I mean, it's Browning's still there, Josie Jewell. I mean, I know these guys are not kind of unproven, but I mean, apart from his hair, what Singleton really got going for him? Lovely hair. But no, seriously, seriously, I'm just not. Yeah, I'm not big on him anyway. Going to dropping down, then we've got people like Okereke, Zach Cunningham, huge player. I like Team 3. I like what Team 3 are doing. They seem to be picking up the player. They're picking up the player that possibly should have gone earlier. There's a lot of that. We'll talk about DLs in a minute, but Judon also is a very good pickup at that range. I like Team 3.
I think they've done well quite late on. Actually, they've not.
I don't like T. I don't. I'm not sure if I'd have picked Hill at that early, but there we go. Anyway, sorry. So where are we going?
So
linebackers done.
Yeah, we've covered off the linebackers. So let's move on to what would be our next sort of priority, as we touched on earlier. So let's have a look at the DLs.
Yeah.
And so what are we looking at? So yeah, I mean, obviously Watt's gone off nice and early.
TJ Watt gone off first, has it?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't think I've got the TJ. I take it was TJ Watt, Leonard. Not Leonard, Aaron Donald.
Yeah. So Watt went, Donald went, Garrett went. And then we come back round. Nick Bosa had gone. So by the time, I mean, what you guys are looking at, so from team 1 through 4. So by the time we got back to team 4 on the snake, Donald, Garrett, Bosa had all gone.
So
Chase Young was the next one out of those.
It's early for him, isn't it? 6'12", I think.
Yeah.
I think it's early for him. We'll talk about this, isn't it? We'll talk about this in a bit of depth, really, because Chase Young's a bit of a gamble. I mean, we all know the potential, and we saw it in that year 1. But I mean, he hasn't posted any real figures yet. But I kind of get it when you're picking it. When you're picking it one, like you mentioned earlier, Brian, when you're talking about either end of the draft board, the issue you get is if they don't take one there, then the next sort of pick is the 8-12. So they might be, I don't know where they'd be. Well, Crosby went off at the 9-2. So
there was quite a gap.
Yeah, in a funny way, it's only a couple of picks. For team 1, Crosby is the next man on the block. So they haven't really lost anything picking him there. But what did they give up, positionally, I don't know. They could have took him later in the round and picked somebody better up, maybe than I don't know, maybe better than Goddard for a start. I don't know, but it depends on what they wanted to do.
Well, we're not that high on tight ends, but let's not get bogged down in that.
No.
It's. I mean,
it's a bit early.
I don't know. It is, and sort of. Yeah, it is a bit of a gamble. I'd like to see sort of Young. You could see him having a breakout season. You can see him being busy at the Commanders. No two ways about that. He's going to have plenty of time on the field if he stays fit. But we know the potential's there. We just don't have it's a bit like other players we've mentioned in previous pods, JC Horn and players like that you'd like to see come back in and have a breakout season. The potential's there. They were taken, they were picked where they were picked for a reason. I don't know. I don't think it's that radical.
I just feel that you've got players like Max Crosby, Trey Hendrickson to come, and they're quite a few rounds later. And I think for me that's probably where he should have gone. He should have gone a little bit later. But I kind of get it when you're on the end of you're on the end of the draft. Get it? I can't be too critical. But so going on to that, then it's sort of like we've got Young at the come off 4th, Crosby 5th, Hendrickson. Sorry, Young at 5, Crosby 6, Hendrickson 10.
Yeah.
Is that right? So like a 10th, something like that. Around that 10th, and then Hayward was like 14th, 15th. Landry, then Judon. Oh, sorry, Landry, Josh Sweat. You got Judon coming off 29th. You got these guys at the bottom that there's some good value there out of those players. Anybody that springs out to you, Brent?
Yeah, I mean, I think taking someone like, I mentioned him earlier. We were talking about the age thing, but I mean, if you're picking up a Cam Hayward at 12, 11, can't really complain about that.
No.
He's a tried and tested player. Okay, 32. Does he stay fit? But you don't see the Steelers. They're not going to change their scheme. You don't see his role really changing. You can pretty much predict if he stays fit, the numbers are going to be there or thereabouts. Yeah, turning 33 soon, going to see a little bit of a drop off, possibly. Don't know.
I totally agree with you. And I look, when we were talking about the Chase Young pick earlier at 6'12", and when you look at these players, Max Crosby, Trey Hendrickson, Cam Hayward, Harold Landry, Matt Judon, obviously Josh Sweat is one of these guys that, okay, he's a young lad that might do. He shows signs that he's going to be really good. But those players, I mean, they could all outscore Chase Young this year.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be the massive shock.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're looking at Cam Hayward, sort of DL4 last
so
season.
When you look at value, DLs, I think DLs is quite deep, isn't it?
It's not bad actually. I mean, I'm just sort of looking down a little further down. It went off late. I mean,
what we've got a points difference between some of these players as well, because talking about the DLs when they come off the board, I mean, again, it does seem there's not a massive amount of points difference, not like the linebackers, which there is a bit of a fall off.
No, I mean, we sort of looked at it. I'm just looking for this spreadsheet now.
Yeah.
What do we got? So
I've got the DL13 at 200 points, and I've got the DL31. Is that right? DL36 at 155. So there's 50 points between 13 and 36. 30. It's not a massive amount. And then there's some decent talent in there. This is where you've got to try and look at your leagues and what the gap is between the difference in a DL13, DL10, DL20. As soon as you start to grasp those figures, you know where to invest.
Yeah,
so go on.
Just having a quick look. Where did?
So we can split. We'll move to DBs.
Yeah, no, I was just looking a little bit further down the list, sort of points difference. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about, sort of 30, 40 points.
Yeah.
Across sort of, the top.
It's not really
10 to 20. It's yeah.
It's not really enough for me. You know what I mean?
No, and then you're looking into, I mean, again, this sort of draft was a bit different, but again, if you're looking at sort of a full roster where you've got, you can stick someone like that on the bench and look at the matchups and, how they're going to perform against, again, you look at, what's the O-line like this week? Are they going up against a Wilson or another sack happy quarterback? It's
This is the thing, and this is where, like, when you're talking about earlier about positional stuff, this is where linebackers don't matchup wise. It's really difficult on linebackers. You just got to go on production. Really, you can't go too much on the matchup side of things. When you can a bit more on, well, you definitely can on the edge rushers. So that comes into it, and that's why for me that you're going to have to get those big linebackers early.
Yeah, definitely.
So go on then. Let's flip to DB quickly. We're over by a good 9 minutes.
Right. Okay. Well, let's make this real quick because this sort of ties in with the question that we kind of skipped over. Look at the pink, just in that section, and that if you could expand that across the 12 teams, that is quite indicative. That bit along that bottom bottom four rows there. That kind of runs across the entire draft with a couple of exceptions. Obviously, Derwin James went off, quite early.
He did, yeah.
And yeah, he went off at 6-7, and then dropping down to R4. The next one off was
I don't dislike people taking a punt on that real top guy, and I agree. The thing is with Derwin James is people say, oh yeah, got no real consistency on figures. Yeah, but the guy's been out injured a lot. So I mean, when you take out the fact that he's fit, and he did play like 17 games or whatever he played, and it was pretty consistent week in, week out.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned this, I know, on different podcasts and stuff, but have a look at the week in, week out as well. When you're looking at trying to pick up consistent players, have a look at what they score week in, week out, because that will really tell you, you know what I mean? You don't want major spikes. You don't want a 20-point week and then a nothing point week. You want a couple of tens, you know what I mean, over those 2 weeks, because that means that he's doing it every week. And that's you do want that.
Yeah,
especially on starters, early starters.
Yeah. And with the DBs, it's kind of easier to gauge. I mean, you look at, as Nate said, you look at the week to week, right? Well, they racked up a big, right? Why? Well, they were playing against a rookie quarterback, and it's that. If you've got a ball hawk against a poor, passing side, they're going to pick up big points, but that's unlikely to happen. This is why we come back to the tackles, the snap counts.
It's so funny.
And it is because you look at, I mean, we've touched on where the run started for the linebackers, and to a slightly lesser extent where the DL's run started. But as Nate hinted on, there's still a lot of value there further on down the board. Now, you look at when Derwin James went off, 6-7, there's a big gap.
Yeah.
And then someone finally went Jamal Adams.
Yeah.
Because, and then a little bit of a run, Jeremy Chin, Buda Baker, Minka Fitz. But
the majority of people at that part of the draft as well are thinking, when are my linebackers coming in? That's what you're thinking. You're not thinking, Jesus, I'm going to take a DB. You're not, but somebody's gone and done it, and then you suddenly go, oh, well.
But this is a good exercise, because as Nate said, the people that have got involved in this are people that are sort of like-minded. So no one's going to. We're all looking at it going, go on, have a nibble on the deep, have a run, go on, leave some linebackers on the board.
There's a lot,
but no one's done it. And,
you
get down to like 15-1, 15-2, and people going, yeah, I'll have a nibble, and then you get sort of 16-8, and then there's finally a run on some DBs. You go, there's a lot of us in this that we all speak the same language. There's a lot of problems towards the back end, which we were all laughing. The DB run was huge. It was. But I'll tell you what. Well, in the 18th round, with the exception of Highsmith, every single player picked was a DB, and it's not much better the round before that. So, going back to some of the listeners' questions, how do you prioritize your IDP players? That's kind of it. It's, again, as Nate said, you've got to react to the way the draft pans out to some degree. But that's probably a pretty good basis.
Yeah, and talking about the interesting thing that what I was talking about earlier, and what people should take into consideration, is the fact that when I'm talking about the emergence of the safeties coming up into the box and also playing in the slot, what that actually does is it actually damages the use of the linebacker more than what that's what I'm getting at. Not so much the picking up of the DB, even though we absolutely love them. They are by far my favorite position at this moment in time. Safety is absolutely by far my favorite. My favorite players, I think my top 4 favorite players are all in the DB category, because it's just so good to watch. I love to be able to watch a player that can do it.
To be fair, Kyle Duggar accounts for 3 of those 5, so...
He's a great player. It was just the fact he just fitted in. The fact that he went to a college that nobody knew about. He got drafted when he got drafted, and then you look at it and he comes in and everyone goes, he's good, isn't he? And you go, yeah.
Well, actually, while you're on this, is something you mentioned before the pod, and I know we're overrunning, so I'm going to be quick, but we said we would sort of touch on it, and it's someone that Team 1 took very late on at 17-1, and it's someone I know you're sort of quite big on. Mr. Abraham at the Raiders in terms of sort of how he could see an uptick this season.
I am big on him. I think it's just a bit of an interesting thing with him. Abraham took a lot of snaps in the box. He gets involved in all sorts of things. He's a very I don't know how you say it, elusive. Oh, that's the wrong word. No, I don't. It's just aggressive. Oh, well, he's aggressive. He's one of these safeties that is absolutely flying about all over the place, and is just then generally putting himself about. And the thing is with Ngakoue going and the Chandler Jones setup now, they've got two bigger guys on the edge. So if they want to mix it up, where they would have used Ngakoue a bit more, then I see that Abraham's got even more potential usage of being used there. And they might not. Maybe they've changed it more. But these are kind of guesses at this kind of preseason stage. We don't know. We're going to wait and see the draft as well. Obviously, I'm not going to make too many massive predictions until I know the full roster and where everyone's going.
It's not a bad chat. I'm just looking at his number, and again, you're looking at sort of the week-to-week stuff. I mean, like you say,
great,
busy player, 114 tackles last season, but he had a really strong finish to the season.
Yeah,
good tackle numbers against some good teams.
And
week 10, Kansas. Week 11, the Bengals. Following week, Dallas. Kansas again. So, he can do it against some good offenses.
Snap count good, and like I said, his percentage snaps in the box and in the slot as well. He was up there getting involved a lot of the time, which is really encouraging to see from an IDP perspective. So so I think down there, I think that's really good value from somebody who's picked him up.
Yeah, probably not so much Diablo, but there you go. We'll wait and see.
Oh, I like to. The problem is, the thing is with Diablo, you play him at safety, or you play him in the DB slot, and he turns up as being the lead linebacker. He's going to catapult himself right up that draft. He's going to be in a different stratosphere. So it's a hell of a gamble by DB, but by number one. And I like it. I like it. Cheeky.
I think some people will take. I mean, it's a great name, Divine Diablo, but him and Boogie Basham.
There you go, mate. Let's just
put your team on names. There you go. It's like doing the Grand National. No, don't do that. Don't do that. That's what we're here for.
Don't do that.
No, bad advice.
Don't do that. So well, guys, like I said, this is the first week of 3 of doing this and going through this draft board and doing our introduction to IDP. Have a little look on Twitter. Follow the guys that you need to be following. Follow Mike Wooler. Follow Tom Kisenbury. Follow IDP guys, IDP Show, and follow obviously Fantasy and Frames, and obviously ourselves. And try and build your knowledge that you can do on IDP. But at the end of the day, that's what it's down to. Make yourself a bit of a spreadsheet, get it all together, and before you know it, you'll be in good stead against all the people that you're playing against. And that kind of concludes it for this week. So
and again, I mean, it's been quite good sort of looking through some of these questions. So again, I know they said it before. Hit us up on Twitter if you do have any questions. We'll chuck them up there. It's not, and some of those seem very basic questions, the age thing and stuff like that. It isn't. It is relevant. It's about sort of putting it together with all the other information as well. So it's just don't be shy. If you've got any queries, just fire them across. And we'll sit down, have a look at it, and try and make some sense of it. Hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, that concludes it, guys. Have a cracking Easter, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, I'm off to buy a new laptop charger. Apologies for the technical cock up earlier. So we're not going to get next week, I promise.
Unbelievable. I don't understand why he's wearing clogs as well. Unbelievably noisy.
Yeah, I'm soundproof this showroom properly.
Unbelievable.
Getting old, mate. I'm carrying a bit of timber. I'm not as light on my feet as I used to be.
None of us are.
Cheers, guys. All right. Take care, guys. Right. We'll see you next week, I guess.
Keep rushing.